Hi, first and second grade. I hope you had a great week and had a lot of fun working on our project last week. A lot of you sent me some really great pictures of your artwork, and you guys did a wonderful job. You've been doing a great job. I have another fun project for you this week. We're going to be talking about architecture this week. And architecture is a term we use to describe buildings and the art of designing buildings. And it can be any kind of building: houses, churches, schools, hospitals, any type of building. We're going to be focusing on one type of building in particular this week, though. We're going to be talking about skyscrapers. And skyscrapers aren't really common around here, but if you've ever been to New York or Philly, you'll have seen some of those really, really tall buildings that we're going to consider skyscrapers. And they're really tall, they're not really fat, pretty skinny, but they have lots and lots of windows. So that's what we're going to be thinking about this week when we make our project. This week, you're going to need to grab a piece of white paper, some colored paper if you have it. If not, some pattern paper like scrapbook paper would work really well too. Also, a pencil, eraser, a Sharpie, or a black marker. Any type of black marker will work. And a ruler if you have one, because that's going to be very helpful as we're starting to do the drawing part of this. So grab all those things and we'll get started. So this is a better view of our project, and we're actually going to start by drawing on the colored paper. Now, like I said, if you don't have colored construction paper or colored paper, a piece of scrapbook paper will work, any kind of color. And if you don't have any paper like that, just use white paper for everything and it'll still work just fine. The colored paper just adds a little bit of something to it. So grab your colored paper or white paper if you don't have it. For this one, I'm going to actually use some red paper. And the first thing we want to do is we're going to draw two skyscrapers on the right side of the paper. Now, you can see one's shorter and one's a little bit taller. They're not quite the same size. One's a little bit fatter, one's a little bit skinnier. Just to show the difference between the two as we're drawing them. And you can see too, they're just rectangles. And then I have a little skinny rectangle next to that big front rectangle of the building that shows the side of the building, and it makes it look more three-dimensional and a little more realistic. So we're going to start with the front of each of the buildings. So I'm going to take my ruler, and again, if you don't have a ruler, a piece of cardboard or a notebook, something with a really hard straight edge will work fine. We're not really measuring, we're more using the ruler for a straight edge. So I'm going to draw a line parallel to the edge of my paper. Now, parallel, if you remember from math class, means that the two lines, the edge of my paper and the edge of my ruler, are going to go side by side the whole way and never touch, never cross. So the two lines are parallel, and they're not super far apart, maybe about an eraser apart. Draw a line there. And then I'm going to go over just a little bit, a real tiny little bit, especially tiny compared to the space I just left, and draw a second line. Now, this second line isn't quite as tall as the first one. Take my ruler, a straight edge again, straight line across the top for that bigger section of a rectangle. Now, this smaller rectangle here that I drew next to the big one, you're actually going to take that one and we're going to have it be angled. So it's a diagonal line up to the top of that building. And there's my first skyscraper ready to go. Now for the second skyscraper, I'm going to make this one a little bit skinnier, but again, parallel to those lines that I just drew. Draw a line down, and I'm just going to draw a line across the top right away. Then I'm going to draw a second line very close to that line I just drew, not quite as tall though, and then a diagonal line to connect the top to the top of that line to the top of my skyscraper. Let me go over those with Sharpie real quick, just so you can see them a little bit better, because I know sometimes they're hard to see on the screen. And like I said, if you don't have a Sharpie, a black marker of any sort will work just fine. Sharpies are just usually my go-to. All right, so So now I have my 2 skyscrapers on the colored paper or the background. If you're using white paper, this would just be your background. It doesn't have to be colored. Now I can start adding windows. Now your windows do not have to be anything special, any fancy shape. They can be squares, they can be rectangles. It doesn't have to be fancy. And you can see on the one building I have a door, on the other one I don't. So you don't even have to include that. If you want to mix the windows up a little bit, do some squares and then some rectangles, you can do that. Have fun with it. It's a very simple kind of project with that part of things. So have some fun with it. I'm just going to stick with squares again. And I'm going to draw. You want to try and keep them as close to the same as you can. But if they don't quite stay the same, not a big deal. I'm just going to draw a bunch here a while and then let you you'll fill in the rest. I am going to include a door again on this one, but like I said, you don't have to include doors if you don't want to. If you want to make a sign on your building, you can also do that. Think about the skyscrapers that you have seen. I'm sure you've seen some of them somewhere. Think about what they look like. There's not usually a whole lot of ornamentation or a lot of decoration on them, but there might be a sign or two, which is fine. And on this one, I'm going to stick to more rectangular windows. Oh. See, even teachers make mistakes. So once you have all your windows and doors drawn, you want to take that black marker or that Sharpie, whatever you're using, back, and you can just outline the windows. But you can also color them in. So maybe do a little bit of both if you want. Again, very much up to you and how you want your building to look. So once you have all of the windows colored in, the next thing we need to do is we want to make this side piece look almost like a shadow. That way we're not worried about drawing windows on it or doors. And it also will help, again, make the buildings look a little more three-dimensional, a little more realistic. So you're just going to take that black marker, that Sharpie, whatever you're using, and see how the top of the section here is angled. We drew that diagonal line. We're going to just keep following that line with diagonal lines pretty close together, just in that small section of the side of the building. The front is the windows and the doors. The side is going to be these diagonal lines pretty close together to make it look almost like a shadow. And these are going to go the whole way from the top to the bottom of the building. You can see on here on my example, top to bottom, just diagonal lines, fairly close together. When up close, you can see the space between them, but if you stand far apart, it might be hard to see that space. And it's the same on the second building as well. So just keep making those diagonal lines. If you feel more comfortable doing this in pencil first, please go ahead. I know some of us get a little bit nervous sometimes when we do things in marker right away. So if you feel more confident doing it in pencil first and then tracing it with the Sharpie or the marker, go for it. So you would just keep doing that. Once you have the windows traced and colored in, if you're coloring them in, and all the diagonal lines done on the sides of the two buildings, then you're ready to go to our main building, which if you're doing colored paper is going to be out of the white paper. Otherwise, it's still going to be on white paper, but you're going to want a different sheet of white paper because we're going to actually cut it out and glue it on to make it look like it's more in the front of the other two buildings. So now I have my white paper, and I'm actually going to do something a little bit different with this building because it is in the front, so I want it to stick out and I want it to look a little bit different than my other two skyscrapers, which are kind of in the background here. So This one I'm going to use a bunch of different sizes of squares and rectangles to make a really tall building, and then maybe even a little triangle at the top to top it off. So again, ruler again, if you'd like to have one for the straight edge. I'm going to start by making just a kind of tall rectangle. You just want to be careful when you're making this bottom section, or this entire building. You want to make sure that you don't make it too fat that it's going to go off the edge of the paper here. We need to make it so that it will still fit next to these two buildings that we already have on our background, whether it be on the white paper or the colored paper. We still need to make sure there's enough room for this building to fit. So I have it drawn, and I'm going to just quick check. Yep, I have enough room for everything to fit. So I have a rectangle here, and then I'm going to draw just another skinny long rectangle on top of that. And it's almost like a cake. It just keeps getting a little bit smaller as it goes up. Nothing too difficult. And then another small skinny rectangle again. And on this one, I'm going to make almost more of a square. Another one of those small skinny rectangles. And to top it off, a triangle. So again, it's just a whole lot of shapes. We're not doing anything real crazy, just a bunch of shapes. And then in each section, you're going to go back and add doors and windows. And if you want to make a sign or something, you can, that it's whatever business or entrance, things like that might be a good idea for a sign. Now at the top of mine, I'm going to get a little bit fancy, and I'm going to draw kind of a half circle. Some older skyscrapers did have some slightly fancier parts to them, but they still weren't very hard to draw. It was still very basic shapes. So I'm just going to do half circles for a little something different. And then I'm going to go in and add my doors and windows, just like I did on those other two buildings for the background or the colored paper. And again, I'm drawing all the doors and windows in pencil first, just in case I need to move something, because sometimes when you draw rows and rows of things, they don't quite line up right all the time. If I draw them in pencil first, I can move them if I need to. Now this building on the white paper, or the building that's going to be in the front, is where you can get a little bit fancier, because we do want this one to stand out a bit from the other two buildings. Those are kind of back off in the distance, and this one's right front and not quite center, but up front and center, so to speak. So if you want to make this one a little bit fancier than the others, this would be a great time to do that. With different doors, different windows, the little half circles that I added, things like that. And I'm actually also going to take a thinner black marker, and inside my little half circles here, almost like I did with the shadows on the big buildings, I'm just going to draw little straight lines just to give it something different. I'm also going to do that on those small, skinny, long rectangles that I added in between each level. And then take my fatter Sharpie, and I'm going to trace over the whole entire thing, all my pencil lines. You're going to trace over the windows too. I'll come back and do that in just a minute. So once you have everything traced, you might want to go back, if you're coloring it in any of the windows, color those in, and then just go back with your eraser, erase any of those pencil marks still peeking out, because we always miss a couple. Then you're going to take a scissors and very, very carefully, you're going to cut right next to your Sharpie line or your black marker line the entire way around the building. You don't want to cut anything apart. It should still be one entire building when you're done. We're just going to cut around the outside of the building. Very carefully. You don't want to cut any of the black marker lines off. You're just going to cut kind of right next to it. So you need to go very slowly, very carefully. So now I have that building cut out. I'm going to use the other part of this paper as kind of my placemat. Take my glue, put glue all around the edges, a little in the middle, and then I'm going to glue it so the bottom of the building is against the bottom of my colored paper or the background paper if you're using a white paper for both. Press it down so it's stuck on there good. And you should have your little skyscrapers. So have a lot of fun with your skyscrapers this week, second grade and first grade too. Remember, it's basically long rectangles with lots of windows, and we're just making that real small rectangle next to it to show the shadow and make it look a little more three-dimensional and a little more realistic. Doors and windows, colored paper if you have it, if not scrapbook paper, or if not, just use 2 sheets of white paper. All of them will work, and it's all going to be neat because you're making it. You guys have been doing a really great job with all the projects that we've been doing. I love seeing all the pictures that I've been getting, and I love when you include yourself in your picture too. I hope you have fun with this one, and if Mom and Dad can help you email me a picture of it, I would love to see it, and I'll see you next week with another fun project. Have a great week.